The factory floor always smelled of coolant and sweat, metallic tang curling in my nose and lingering on my clothes long after I'd gone home. That morning, dawn was an oily blue outside the grimy windows, and the hum of the machines had faded into uneasy silence. I was standing by the time clock nursing cold coffee in my stiff fingers, watching the others murmur in small huddles. The foreman wore his camouflage cap a little askew, as if he'd pulled it on in the dark and forgot to check his reflection. His words bounced off the cinderblock walls and through me, each one sharpened by disappointment. "We won't need you back next week, Mila." He didn't meet my eyes, just scratched his chin and shrugged, as if the decision was out of his hands, a cruel formality. My coworkers looked away. Stevie, who sometimes slipped me chocolate bars, couldn't do more than nod at the floor. I didn't beg. I pressed my lips together and swallowed the shame gathering at the base of my throat. My pride was thin, stretched, but still intact. The time clock punched out my last shift, a disgruntled exclamation from the battered machine, and that was it. I exited through the steel doors for the final time, denim apron still tied around my waist, my dreams boxed up in the plastic bag at my side, sketchbook, pencils, 3 tattered fashion magazines. Walking home past the convenience store and the deli with fogged-up windows, my ears rang with a cocktail of fear and exhaustion. In the grey light, all I wanted was the comfort of my mother's kitchen table, the old floral cloth, her chipped mug. I wanted her world to make sense even while mine dissolved beneath my feet, but the kitchen offered only the brittle quiet of early morning. My mother sat at the table, her thin fingers sifting through envelopes. She looked up, saw my face, and her lips pressed into a frown, familiar territory for both of us. "So," she said, "they let you go." She didn't sound surprised. I nodded and let my bag slump to the floor. I wanted her arms around me. Instead, she blew on her tea. Silence stretched between us, noisy with the questions she always asked. "And now what, Mila?" There was no gentleness in her voice, just the flat certainty of habit. "Will you finally think realistic?" I took a seat, staring at my scraped knuckles. "I can't work in a factory anymore, Ma. I can't unsee what I've seen. I want to try for fit again." My voice trembled, but I found a steel core beneath it, an old friend of sorts. My mom shook her head. "Artists starve. You want to be poor all your life, sewing pretty things for no one." She reached for her mug, her hand shook just a little. "You need a job, something with hours, pension, security." "It's more than pretty things," I said softly. "I want to make something from nothing. I want to." I trailed off. She wasn't listening. She never did when my dreams poked holes in her reality. The next few weeks blurred, a patchwork of rejection emails, tense evenings with my uncle or my mother's friends chiming in with unsolicited advice, disbelief curdling in their eyes. "She wants to design dresses in New York, our Mila." "With what money?" the whispers went. Or to my face, "Maybe you should focus on something you're good at, darling." Every time I passed neighbors on the stoop, I braced myself for their polite smirks, the way their eyes flicked over my second-hand coat as if every seam were a failure. But every night I penciled dresses by the kitchen window, using graying light to shade pleats and collars, lace along hems. Some nights I barely slept, hunched over my notebook while the city was a distant rumble. My father's sewing machine, rescued from the back closet, took up half our counter. It stuttered and wheezed, but with patience I turned thrift store finds into rough prototypes. The day I got my acceptance letter to fit, I found my mother peeling potatoes at the sink. I held that envelope like an amulet. "Full scholarship," I said, voice small but unbreakable. She looked at me, the knife pausing mid-slice. "For how long?" "4 years." My smile was shaky, guilty in the face of her worry. She shook her head but didn't argue. "At least you won't have to pay for foolishness." That was the closest I would get to support. I clung to it. I arrived at the dorm with 2 suitcases, a battered portfolio, and nerves wound tight as piano wire. The world inside those walls was different, fast, bright, filled with students whose parents owned warehouses or ran fashion labels. Their laughter felt rehearsed, their confidence cemented in childhood. I stood in the corner at mixers, clutching my coffee, measuring myself against everyone else and coming up short. But the classes, the noise, the rush of ideas, the mad scramble for fabric at mood, the teachers barking about lines, the students grabbed by feverish inspiration at midnight, that was everything I imagined and more. I lost myself in the work. I learned to drape and cut, to sketch whole collections in 2 days. I made friends with K Senior, a fierce Ukrainian with royal cheekbones and no patience for self-pity. I finished assignments in the dead of night, shuffling past sleeping roommates, my mind ablaze with possibility, but every summer I went home. And every summer my tiny victories, an internship, a portfolio award, a photo in the Fit Quarterly, were greeted with the same wary half-smile from my mother. My aunt asked if I wanted to be famous like Versace. My uncle shook his head, muttering, "Big shots, these kids." Only my younger cousin Elena seemed to listen, eyes wide as saucers as I described the city. I learned to temper my stories. Success, when you come from a place like ours, is suspect. They measured it in paychecks and square footage, not in fabric or print. The real struggle hit after graduation, when the glossy world of promises evaporated under the city's hard sun. I took work sewing buttons and hems for a midtown tailor, juggling 2 jobs to pay for a shoebox apartment with water stains on the ceiling. Fit contacts led nowhere. My sketchbook filled with new ideas, but I sketched in the margins of shift schedules between exhaustion and rent. One winter, I ventured into the garment district with my portfolio, pressing samples into the hands of anyone who'd take them. Most barely looked up. At a casting for young designers, the panel didn't hide their boredom. "Pretty but derivative," one said, flicking through with chipped nails. Next. I left, humiliated, warmth leaking from me in thin spirals as I bundled up and plunged into the steel-grey evening. I nearly quit that year twice, maybe more, but when I hit bottom, something hard inside me refused to dissolve. I remembered the factory at dawn, my mother's kitchen, the taste of rejection burning my throat. I sewed faster, cheaper, better. I watched YouTube tutorials until my vision blurred. I started selling reconstructed vintage jackets online under my name, Mila Vera, spelled out without apology. Orders dribbled in at first, 1, then 3, then a dozen. Fashion bloggers found me, posted photographs. Instagram changed everything. Suddenly people all over the city sent me their worn leather, their outlandish requests, their trust. I accepted everything, saying yes before I knew what it meant, figuring things out and making mistakes silently. By the second year, a proper influencer tagged me, sales spiked overnight, my savings grew, I quit my second job. I met Kay Senior for drinks in the village and she hugged me so hard my bones creaked. "People see you now, Mila," she whispered into my ear. I laughed, disbelieving, a little giddy. A showroom took a chance. I rented a tiny workspace with windows that only partly stuck. I hired Elena, now grown, as my assistant. Together, we packed orders, argued over fabric choices, laughed late over espresso. I made pieces for the editor of a big magazine. Her photo went viral. Suddenly, other designers, established names, asked for collaborations. "I love your edge," one wrote. "Your story feels real. There's hunger in it." The hunger never left. It kept me up at night designing collections, lines paying homage to the factory's angular grit, the delicate florals of my mother's kitchen table, even old neighbors on the stoop, their laughter echoing in my memory. It was 3 years before I could breathe easily, before the idea of returning home wasn't tainted by dread. That spring, after the biggest show of my career, I packed my new collection, a line inspired by working-class women, sharp suits softened by lace, hard-wearing denim sculpted into elegant shapes, into garment bags, and booked a flight back. Queens was the same in ways that ached. The sidewalks cracked from countless winters, the corner stores stacked with dusty candies, the air thick with hot oil from the chicken place down the block. My aunt still occupied the same plastic chair by the stoop, hawk-eyed as always. Her mouth fell open at the sight of me, but she recovered quickly, all brisk affection. "Too fancy for us now, huh, Mila?" I kissed her cheek, smiled, let her see the teeth I straightened with my first real paycheck. Inside, my mother sat at the kitchen table, looking older but no less determined. She eyed my suitcase, my pressed blouse, her lips twitched. "Home for a while or just passing through, big shot?" "Home," I said and settled in. That night I made soup and told her stories, not of famous parties or Instagram likes, but of hard nights working, of scraping by, of my tiny victories in a world that didn't care. On Saturday morning I invited everyone, family, neighbors, even my old factory foreman, to a fashion thing at the local rec center. My mother rolled her eyes but came, perched in her best dress. The rec center was barely big enough for the racks I'd brought. I transformed folding tables into makeshift runways, hung lamps to brighten cracked walls. Elena helped me dress the volunteers, my cousin, 2 daughters from the next building, a school friend's mother, each one fierce and beautiful in their own skin. At first the crowd was restless, skeptical. My uncle muttered, "What's this? Dresses for us." But when the first model walked out in a pinstriped jacket I had tailored to her body, her shoulders squared, her eyes bright, the room stilled. There was applause, awkward at first, then swelling. Each look was greeted with more warmth, a mother in a flowing denim dress, her daughter in a chopped-up jacket, both smiling for once without reservation. I stepped out at the end, my heart a fist in my chest. My hands trembled, my knees felt hollow, but I held my head high. I stood beside my models, all hometown souls, and said, I made this for us. For everyone who told a girl from the factory her dreams were impossible. I looked at my mother. She was crying quietly, hands pressed to her mouth, a trembling smile on her face. Later, my uncle clapped me on the back, pride and apology warring in his eyes. The neighbors brought me plates of cookies, eager to talk. The girls from the building hugged me in the kitchen, laughing, showing off photos on their phones. When everyone had gone, my mother took my hand. I didn't know, she said softly, the tenderness new and raw between us. I didn't know you could do this, I thought. I shook my head. It's all right, Ma. She looked at me, truly looked, as if seeing me not only as her daughter but as someone capable, someone whose dreams had weight. You made them proud. You made me proud too. There was silence, full this time, bearing no sharp edges. I let it settle. I felt steel somewhere deep in my bones, but the bitterness had softened. This was home, rebuilt and reforged as much as any collection I'd ever made. That night I unfolded my father's old sewing machine and began another dress at the same table, the city flickering just beyond our window, our laughter threading through, strong and familiar, a world away from the factory floor.